Good afternoon. On behalf of the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Inside Detox Me, a new mobile app from Silent Spring Institute. My name is Michelle Dixon, and I am the Program and Development Coordinator for the Mass Breast Cancer Coalition, and I am pleased that you could join us today. I would like to introduce you to our speaker, Jessica Helm. Jessica joined Silent Spring Institute in 2014 for a postdoctoral research fellowship, where she had orchestrated the development of Detox Me smartphone app. Jessica received her PhD in neuroscience from Stony Brook University and a BS in biology at Washington and Lee University. For her doctoral research in neuroscience, Dr. Helm studied cellular contributions of cortical interneuron subtypes to network function. While a graduate student, she held leadership positions in the Sierra Club and currently serves on their board of directors. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And thanks everybody for joining us on the webinar today. I'm thrilled to be here. So today I'm going to be taking you on a behind-the-scenes tour of Detox Me, the mobile app I've produced here at Silent Spring Institute. So did you know that furniture releases flame retardant chemicals into homes and that these chemicals can affect fertility, children's development, and cancer? Did you know that the lining of aluminum food and drink cans contains BPA, an estrogenic chemical? And did you know that substitutes for BPA can be just as harmful? So these are some of the things that we've identified here at Silent Spring Institute in the course of our research and that have made it into the app, and some of the things that I'm going to be talking to you about today. Perhaps if you're joining us today, you may be some of the few people who are aware of these things, but many people are not. So we felt that it's really important to get this kind of information out there. So today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about where this app is coming from here at Silent Spring Institute, talk you through some of the science behind Detox Me, and then take you on a walkthrough of the app and its key features. Finish off by telling you what's different about Detox Me, and then I'll take your questions. So the origins of Detox Me. Detox Me was built here at Silent Spring Institute. We were founded 20 years ago by breast cancer activists in Massachusetts, including Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, who's hosting this call, was a sister organization of ours and helped to found Silent Spring Institute. So these breast cancer activists were concerned about elevated rates of breast cancer on Cape Cod and other areas in Massachusetts. And they felt that the majority of the attention was going to treatment and detection for breast cancer, and that not enough attention was being focused on breast cancer prevention and the factors that were leading to breast cancer, especially with an eye to identifying factors that could potentially be avoided and help to prevent future breast cancers. So 20 years ago, they founded Silent Spring Institute to be a lab of their own, and since that time, we've been focused on the environmental factors of breast cancer, as well as other diseases affecting women's health. So why environmental factors? Well, to start with, only 5 to 10% of breast cancers are due to known high-risk inherited genes. That leaves 90 to 95% not attributable to any known high-risk genes. Also, 80% of women diagnosed with breast cancer are the first in their families to be diagnosed. So again, opening the door to looking at other factors that may be contributing to the onset of breast cancer. Several studies have looked at the role of environment in breast cancer. The President's Cancer Panel in 2010 and the National Institute of Medicine reports in 2011 both reviewed this and both came to the same conclusions as we had after 20 years of research, that environmental chemicals contribute to breast cancer. Okay, so we think that there's an issue. We think there's other factors contributing to breast cancer and that these include environmental factors. We're interested in studying them. Where do we look? Well, we look at risk factors that have been identified for existing cases of breast cancer by looking at large studies of women and what factors are common in women that have been diagnosed. So In addition to family history, which would indicate a genetic component, we also see things like ionizing radiation or reproductive history, menarche, the age of the first period, the age of the first birth, the age of menopause, weight after menopause, the use of pharmaceutical hormones like hormone replacement therapy or diacylstilbestrol, use of alcohol, physical exercise, tobacco smoke. So what do these things have in common? Well, they're carcinogens or they have something to do with the hormone in the body. So this gives us a clue for things to look at. So the number of studies that have been able to identify chemicals associated with breast cancer are relatively small. It's relatively difficult to do an epidemiological study and identify a set of women where the data is very clear about what chemicals they've been exposed to and another set of women who haven't been exposed to them. So that set is pretty small. To build on that and to get more information about chemicals that might be associated with cancer, we look to animal studies. And there's a slightly larger pool of studies of animals that have been examined for cancer effects after having been treated with chemicals. And when we line those up, as you can see in this chart, in the middle is studies of human breast cancer associated with chemicals on the left, and on the right is studies of rodent mammary tumors or breast tumors. And the red indicates a strong evidence of association, and the dark blue is evidence of no association. And what's interesting is that you can see that they correlate pretty well and that rodent tumors are fairly predictive of human breast cancer. So what that means is that we can use this pool of studies in humans and in animals to find chemicals that potentially might be harmful and lead to breast cancer in humans. Okay, so we have a pool of chemicals, but as I've mentioned, even the available pool of data in animals isn't that large. So how else can we find out what to pay attention to? Well, we can look at the mechanisms. We look at the chemicals that we know that are associated with breast cancer, and we look at the mechanisms underlying the chemicals' role in breast cancer. One mechanism is ionizing radiation. So something like an incoming ultraviolet photon can come in and hit a strand of DNA and break it, and that can lead to uncontrolled cell growth and tumor growth. This mechanism is common to many types of cancer. There are two other mechanisms that we're aware of for breast cancer. One of those is promoting tumor growth, and this is the case for hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. HRT was commonly prescribed for women entering menopause up until 2002, when a large-scale study of the effects of hormone replacement therapy actually showed an increased risk of breast cancer with treatment, and then by and large it's not generally administered on the scale that it was at that time. So what hormone replacement therapy does, or hormones in general, can have this effect. Estrogen can have this effect in progesterone. A normal breast cell that's not replicating in the presence of these hormones can start multiplying and dividing, and a mass of cells that doesn't exhibit tumorous characteristics suddenly starts growing and exhibiting characteristics of a tumor. And the third mechanism is disruption of development. So the breast is vulnerable to disruptions in development. We see this in two cases historically. One is diethylstilbestrol, or DES, and the other is DDT, a pesticide that was used. So DES was used to treat women to prevent miscarriage up until the 70s, and DDT was a pesticide that was widely used into the 70s. And in the case of DES, it was discovered that the daughters of women who'd been given DES while pregnant were ending up with getting, actually initially an unusual uterine cancer, but eventually they ended up getting diagnosed with breast cancer at a much higher rate than normal. And the same with DDT. A study recently came out looking at women who'd been exposed to DDT as teenagers when they were going through puberty. And it turned out that these women were also getting breast cancer at a higher rate. And this points to a couple of things. One is that a disruption in development can make the breast vulnerable to cancer later in life. And the other thing that it points to is that the breast actually has a very long period at which the tissue is immature, it's not fully developed. So the breast finally finishes developing only when a woman becomes pregnant and the breast tissue begins to prepare to produce milk. And up until that time, there's still immature, undifferentiated cells in the breast tissue. So this makes the breast vulnerable, especially during periods of active development, such as in utero, in puberty, and when the woman is pregnant. So chemicals that when a woman is exposed during that time, or men are exposed to during that time, can potentially make them vulnerable. So we have these three mechanisms that we are able to see with chemicals that we know are associated with breast cancer. And so chemicals that we can find in other cases that seem to have the same effect on damaging DNA or promoting tumor growth or disrupting breast development, we can have a reasonable guess that these may have an effect on breast cancer also. So that allows us to broaden our scope of chemicals of concern to things that haven't been fully studied in animals and humans. So why do we need to know all this? Why is this a concern? Well, it turns out that chemicals are not fully tested for safety. In fact, the government can't require any health tests for chemicals in commerce, and it doesn't know what's in most products. So most people think that the products on their shelves have been fully tested and vetted for the safety of all the individual ingredients, but in fact that's not the case. The graphic that I'm showing here is relatively old. Unfortunately, the information is not very easy to get and is not readily regularly updated. So this is from 1998. At that time, the data was on high production volume chemicals, so chemicals that were produced in the country over 1 million pounds a year, so the most commonly used chemicals, most commonly produced chemicals. And what we see is that just 7% of these common chemicals were tested with the full set of basic tests. Mostly people test for things like skin irritation. The full range of tests are quite rare, and of course none of these tests explicitly test for breast cancer. So, you know, we can't rely necessarily on having the data available for, or the government regulating the safety of products that are out there. So we feel that it's important to take what we know from other data and to try to take what preventive measures we can. So all of this is about the toxicity of chemicals, the potential hazards of a chemical, but there's another piece of the puzzle that's just as important, and that's their exposure. So how are you exposed to these chemicals, and where are you exposed to them, and also importantly, where are they coming from? So we've looked at this question here at Silent Spring Institute in a number of ways. I'm going to tell you about the household exposure studies first. We went into homes in Cape Cod in California, a couple of locations in California, and we looked for the presence of endocrine disrupting chemicals. These are chemicals that can interfere with the body's natural hormone systems. And these could have implications for breast development, as I mentioned before, or for tumor growth. So we looked for pesticides, we looked for phthalates. These are chemicals that are added to plastics to make them softer, to PVC plastics. We looked at PAHs, they're found in tar and in combustion like smoke. Phenols and parabens that are present in products that you might buy and bring home. Flame retardants in furniture and electronics. So these chemicals we all knew were of interest, and we wanted to see whether they were actually in homes, specifically in the dust in homes and in the air, and also in people. So it was thought that some of these, it's not entirely clear which products have all of these, which is one of the challenges, but what really wasn't known was whether they were leaving the products and moving into. We tested the dust and the air and wanted to see if they were there. So we found that they were actually very commonly found in homes, in dust, air, and people. And we found that levels indoors could be much higher than levels outdoors. It was previously thought that pollution was something that happened to you outside, but what we found was that really indoor pollution was a very significant factor, especially for these endocrine disrupting chemicals that we were looking at. And we found that levels could be high. We found that all homes had a chemical above health guidelines. This was mostly coming from the plastics and combustion chemicals. But keeping in mind that 28 of the chemicals that we studied didn't have any health guidelines assessed for them, so we couldn't tell you whether they were above the guidelines. Reducing exposure. Another study that we've done was a consumer product testing study. And so in this study, we looked at an assortment of chemicals, some of which were endocrine disrupting. As I mentioned, they can disrupt the body's hormones, and some that were associated with asthma. And we looked at the presence of these chemicals in products, including products, some household products like shower curtains and pillow protectors. This study helped us to find out which chemicals are being reliably labeled and which are not. So by looking at the label, can you tell whether or not a chemical is going to be present, or do chemicals show up on tests that weren't listed on the label? And we were able to find out label, it's often used as a drug, and when it's used as a drug, it has to be labeled. If the label says free, that's a predictor of synthetic chemicals that are associated with them. On the other hand, something like alcohol people to help them reduce their exposure. It also helped us to identify alternative purchasing criteria. So for example, whether a product, if it says it's plant-based or has no fragrance, using these alternative purchasing criteria, certain chemicals we found were present at lower levels or not present in these alternative chemicals. So that also gives us some clues that we can give people to help them reduce their exposures. And then finally, this study allowed us to prioritize certain products that had especially high amounts of the target chemical. For example, air fresheners, which have large numbers of synthetic fragrance chemicals, or shower curtains, which had very high levels of phthalates and might be one possible source of phthalate exposure in the home. So another study that we did was the food packaging study, where what you see here is a chart of BPA levels that were measured in people's urine. And BPA is an endocrine disrupting chemical that sort of acts like estrogen. It's weaker than estrogen, but it has a similar action. And so what you see is on the left, before people have been given a fresh food diet. In the middle, they had all foods prepared for them in glass containers, no plastic, fresh foods. And then on the right, after, is they go back to their regular eating habits. And what we found was that the levels of BPA and DHP actually declined during the fresh food diet, but then recovered to normal levels afterwards. And what that told us was two things. It told us that food packaging is a source for BPA and DHP, phthalates. And it also told us that fresh food helps. In other words, we identified an intervention, something that people could do that would change the level of chemicals in their bodies. And that's a really important point. It speaks to the idea that this is not all bad news. There are things that we can do that can make a change in terms of the levels of chemicals in our bodies. On that line, a few more pieces of evidence that exposure reduction, as we call it, things that you can do to reduce your exposure, actually works. There's some good news out there. A study came out quite recently in teens using labeled products to avoid fragrance and parabens and triclosan, all endocrine disrupting chemicals. And the study found that levels of those chemicals in teens' bodies actually went down when they switched products. And this study was actually coincidentally using some of the same recommendations that we give, I'm going to be telling you about. Another exposure reduction study recently was adults eating organic food for a week had lower levels of organophosphate pesticides in their bodies. So even though we know that there are chemicals out there and that they are getting into our bodies or getting into our homes, we know that there are things that we can do that can make a difference here. And that's where Detox Me comes in. So, over the past 20 years, Silent Spring Institute has been studying the hazards of chemicals and how they relate to breast cancer. We've been studying the presence of these chemicals in homes and in dust and in air and in people. And as we publish papers, we put out tip sheets and we put together this information on our website. And it's very important for us to make this information available to people so that they can actually use it to potentially prevent future disease. But what we really want to do is we want to reach more people with an accessible and interactive tool. And that was the origin of the Detox Me mobile app. And so for the rest of this time, I'm going to be talking you through the app and its key features and showing you how it works. So you see here, the app is divided into 6 categories. So all of the content in the app is in 6 categories. There's home, cleaning, food and drink, children, clothing, and personal care. And so depending on what category you're interested in investigating and making changes, you can dig in. So when you first download the app, you'll be presented with a launch screen, and that's going to give you the opportunity to answer some questions so the app can be personalized to you. So if you say next to that launch screen, you'll come to some questions about you. So your gender, age, ethnic identity, do you rent or own your home, etc. And what this does is it allows the app to personalize the tips to you. So for example, if you rent a home, then tips that are relevant to homeowners, such as insulation or replacing carpets or flooring, would be moved to the end of the content. You would see tips that are relevant to you first. So these questions really help to personalize the app to your relevant situation. We also, so you click on one of these and you select what's relevant to you, and then it'll become entered. We also ask about the types of products that you use, and here we're not asking about every product in the world. We're asking about products that are commonly used, but that some people use and some people don't. So there's a difference between potentially use. We don't ask about shampoo. Most people use shampoo, but we do ask about conditioner, for example. And again, depending on your answers to this, if you uncheck something, it'll be moved to the end. So you won't see it. You'll see only the tips that are most relevant to you first. The last part of the launch sequence here, the first time you use the app, is it'll ask you about notifications. And this will become more clear once you start using the app, but basically this app is going to be reminding you about things that you said you want to work on. So it'll pop up after a default amount of time or that you set. So the default is 2 weeks, but you can change that. So let's say after 2 weeks, it's going to pop up and say, hey, you said you were working on this. How's it going? Do you want to update us? And you can also change the default time to something else if you want it to be 2 days or 2 months or whatever. Okay. All right, that's that for the launch section. Now let's get to the juice of it. Okay, so here's the home screen. As I mentioned, it's got 6 categories, and each of these categories is an entry to the information that's relevant to that. So for example, let's say you want to learn about personal care. You would click on the personal care section here. And you've got some general information, what's in this category, and then you've got learn and track progress and label and DIY guide. So all of a lot of the meat, the real information in this app is in the learn and track progress. So let's go there first. And you can see it shows you a tip, wash your hands regularly. And then underneath is a bunch of text. It's telling you why should I care about this? And a lot of times it'll tell you what you can do differently. So in this case, why do you want to wash your hands regularly? Well, people usually think about germs, but there's also toxic chemicals in dust. So here's why you should think about it. Okay, so notice this arrow here on the right. That's indicating that the way you navigate through these tips is by clicking or by swiping. So let's click here. and swiping to the left, and on the right you see avoid toothpaste containing triglycerin. Why? Okay, well, triglycerin is this antibacterial chemical that's a reproductive disruptor and thyroid disruptor, but you can avoid it by looking on the label of your toothpaste. Okay, so great. Let's say you want to take action on that. You want to go home and you want to check your toothpaste and see whether it has triglycerin on the label, or maybe you know that it's got triglycerin on the label and you want to change it. You want to just do that the next time you go shopping. So you can set yourself a reminder, go to this button here that has 3 little dots, click on that, and you say, I want to work on this, okay? All right, I want to work on this. And you get some positive feedback, changing the world one action at a time, and it says you'll get a reminder in 2 weeks. Remember when we set those reminders before, that's where this becomes relevant. Now in 2 weeks, you'll get a message on your phone that says, avoid toothpaste containing triglycerin, and that way you'll get a chance to respond. It'll remind you to do it if you haven't yet, or if you've already done it, you can say, yeah, I did this, and you can complete the action. Okay. So when I close out this tip, it's going to go on to the next one in a sequence, but just for the purposes of illustration, let's see, there's at the top here, you can see there's 1, 2, 3 tabs, new, working on it, and done. So when I finish this tip and I say I'm working on it, that tip gets moved over to the working on it section. So it's sort of a filing process. You clear things out of your new box and you move them on to working on it and done, and that's where you can find them later. And you notice that the icon here changes to a clock. That means you're working on it. Okay, so next. Also, okay, at the bottom, or if you have an Android phone at the top, this is the iOS version, the Apple version. You look for the icon that says reminders with a little bell symbol, and those are all the tips that you've said you want to work on. You said, I'm working on it, or I want to work on this. And all of them show up there. And ones that you've set a reminder on, that you want to be notified about, those show up with a bell, and everything else shows up with a clock. So here's avoid toothpaste containing triglycerin right here, and you can click on these, and these will open up to the full tip. But it's a quick reference to the things you're working on. Okay, and you can use this also to track your progress. I want to show you here. You see the colors? There's a dark purple and a light purple, dark pink, light pink. So this is a way of measuring the progress that you've made. As you say that you want to work on things, or as you mark them done, it'll actually increment that, and you can see how you're doing relative to the category. All right, so let's say that you get to a tip, you click on Home, and you go to Learn and Track Progress again, and you find a tip that says, choose quick drying cloth like nylon instead of vinyl shower curtains. And why is that? Okay, vinyl shower curtains have phthalates, but let's say you already have nylon shower curtains. Okay, well in that case, you want to take credit for having done that. Click on this button again, and then go, instead of choosing I want to work on this, say I do this. And then you get some positive feedback, simply superb, you made a difference. When you say okay, that tip then gets moved over to the done section, and that's where you can find it later, and also that check mark. That icon turns into a check mark to show that you've done it. And one other feature, okay, let's say you encounter a tip, let's say choose fragrance-free cleaning products. Let's say you're not ready to work on it. You're not ready to change your cleaning products right now, or you just don't want to do that. If it's not right for you, you can say not now. Click on that button, go down to not now, and that'll move it to the end of the line. So it'll move it to the back of the new section. So the other tips that you do want to work on appear there instead. Also, with the moving to the done, you can see the color getting incremented here. So that was all sort of the tip section, which is the interactive, personalized part of it. There's also the label and DIY guide, and that's really meant as a quick reference. Let's say you've used the app, you remembered learning about a DIY cleaning product or something to look for on the label, and you want to find it again. This is how you can do that very quickly. Well, one way you could do it very quickly. Okay, so let's say you want to go to personal care again, and you click on the label and DIY guide instead. And so you'll see something like this. It says, use labels to find safer products. Here are the things to look for. Here are the things to avoid. You want to avoid chemicals like this in the name. You can find some DIY recipes. Under the food and drink guide, some tips on how to clean cast iron pans so that you don't have to use nonstick. Decoders for plastics, which plastics potentially have chemicals of concern. Do you want to look that up real quick? These also have top 10 tips. You can look up in the cleaning guide, again, things to look for and avoid, links out to find better products, and quite helpful, I think, the DIY recipes and safer substitutions. So if you can't remember exactly how much baking soda to dissolve in warm water to make that cleaning solution that works for you, you can look it up here and find it. Okay. You can also collect badges in the process of using the app and interacting with the tips, and some of them are pretty easy to get. You can get them just from learning things and reading about them. So here's one of the first ones you'd earn, Brainiac. You learn 10 ways to reduce your exposure. You can also earn badges for pledging to take action on things or by completing actions, and in this case, Changemaker, you took 5 steps to reduce toxic chemicals in your home. So you can find these badges. They appear when they're completed in color on your home screen. And you can also click down here where you see a award icon down here or up above in an Android where it says badges. Click on that and it'll have the full list of badges. And if you click on one, so you click on DIY Master, and if you haven't done it yet, it'll tell you what to do to earn it. So Mark, I do this on any 3 tips for a DIY alternative, and here are the sections you can find them in. You can find them in cleaning, clothing, and personal care. And for tips for badges that you've already earned, it'll tell you how you earn them. Okay, one other thing. If you've ever heard of an Easter egg is sort of a secret surprise built into things. So there's an Easter egg in here. You might have noticed that the middle image moves around. If you touch it, if you click on that middle image, it opens up to a full scene, and you can swipe left or right, and it's a complete continuous image. And you can see these little empty things here. They're actually badge holders. So when you earn a badge, it fills in. And so you can kind of navigate the scene and see how you're doing relative to the scene and the badges that you haven't earned or have earned. Importantly, you can search or scan to find relevant tips. So this is another good quick way to find tips when you need them. So to do that, you would go to the magnifying glass icon where it says search, click on that, and it opens up a window where you have a text entry place. You click on that and you can type in some text. Keep it simple, of course. And so I typed in curtain, and it brings up 3 tips that are relevant to that. Quick drying cloth, natural materials, paper over vinyl. That's for wallpaper. So you can also scan products. We have a database of over 70,000 products, and so if you scan a product, it'll pull up the relevant tips. To do that, you want to click on the Scan Product button here and hold it over the barcode, and it'll click it and recognize it. Incidentally, if it doesn't find the product, you can still get the relevant tips by entering a product and choosing the category from a drop-down list, and then it'll give you the relevant tips. So you can scan a product. Here we're scanning a lotion. And as a result, we get the following tips. Choose fragrance-free, avoid fragrance and parfum, look for plants, not petroleum, etc. So this is a quick way to find tips. Maybe you're at home and you just want to find something really quickly, or you're in the store and you want to find something, you want to find recommendations, decide whether or not you should buy a product. You can also share tips if you're reading something that you think is pretty important, that you think somebody should know about. You can share with friends. So the way you do this, let's say you're reading about pajamas without flame-resistant chemicals. You find out the kids' pajamas actually have flame-resistant chemicals in them, and you've got a friend with a kid that you think should know about that. You can click on this button and click on the share, and that will pull up all the apps in your phone that are capable of sharing things. Will show up here like text messages or email or Twitter or Facebook. And for most of these, it'll fill in some text for you. Facebook doesn't let you do that, but for everything else, it will. So let's say Twitter, it'll fill in some text, which of course you can edit to personalize for yourself. But check out this on Detox Me, buy pajamas without flame-resistant chemicals, and you can post that to Twitter. You can also share the whole app. Let's say you want to share it with your family or you want to share it with your friends on Facebook. You go to the More section, and then you open that up and pick Share This App. And that'll open up a dialog, places to share. So you want to share to Facebook. That's some text that I wrote, and you can share to Facebook. Okay, so last, if you have been involved with this area, you may have become aware of some other apps that are out there. So I want to tell you how Detox Me is different from them. So there are three main apps out there that deal with chemicals and products: Skin Deep, Think Dirty, and Good Guide. And all three of these use information based on the ingredient label. One limitation of this is that the ingredients info is limited to personal care. In other words, only personal care products are actually required to be labeled with ingredients on the label. And in fact, some of them even aren't. Cosmetics are pretty poorly labeled. But personal care products, that's like shampoo, conditioner, stuff like that, are supposed to be labeled with ingredients. So in those cases, it's possible to tell people something about what might be in that product based on what's in the label. The limitation of that is that there's no one universal database of all products and all ingredients. So the potential is that maybe the label isn't correct, or the database isn't correct, or maybe the product just isn't in the database that's being used. So maybe you can make some decisions on the products that are in the database, but if you scan something and it's not there, then you don't really have any take-home information or other information to act on. So Detox Me is different. We give you the broad set of tools to apply. We give you a set of recommendations. You can look at any product and make a decision on whether it's right for you. And hopefully, eventually, you learn these things, and you might not need Detox Me eventually once you've got this core set of tools. We really want you to give you the tools to apply in your life. We also give you DIY alternatives, and we'll tell you what not to buy. These things are not really possible given a strictly barcode label-based app. We also provide information about habits, like how you clean something, what kind of filter to have on your vacuum cleaner, or how to dust with a wet rag to maximize your efficiency in picking up chemicals, or actions to take outside of products and outside of your home, like what can you do to interact with schools or with your town, or take action on a national level, and we'll connect you with that too. So we really feel that the Detox Me app is about how to live with fewer toxic chemicals, not just how to buy things. We think that's an important difference. So with that, you can find Detox Me by going to detoxmeapp.org. You can also find it on your smartphone by going to the App Store. It's available from the Apple App Store, and it's available on Android from Google Play. And with that, I would love to take your questions if you have. There's a chat box here. I'll hand it back to Michelle to moderate, but there's a chat here, and you should be able to enter your box questions in there. Thanks so much for listening.
Jessica, thank you so much. I'm going to start us off. I actually had a question for you. I noticed in the profile that you complete for the app when you initially set it up, one of the categories was ethnic identity. Mm-hmm. And I was just curious how the app, how the tips reflect potential exposure as it relates to your ethnic background.
That's a really great question, Michelle. I'm glad you asked it. So we're actually going to be adding a set of tips pretty soon. There's some tips in there that are already relevant to that, but we're going to be adding another set soon, probably for Earth Day. So it's most relevant when it comes to principally women of African American or Hispanic origin. There tend to be a different set of hair care products in particular, but also there's different usage for some feminine. So we want to make sure we're prioritized because they could be a potential source of exposure to fragrances and parabens in particular. So we would adjust some of the, primarily in the personal care section, we would adjust the order in which some of those tips were presented.
Excellent. Oh, that's good to know. So do we have any other questions out there? And Jessica, how often is the database updated? I mean, do you have set time frames? You were just referencing adding some new tips come Earth Day.
Yeah, right. So we launched in January. This is going to be our first
So kind of a before and after, to monitor the changing behavior.
Now, we're actually extremely interested in using this in conjunction with an exposure reduction study, and we're definitely looking for opportunities to do that. Yeah. I mean, based on some of the research that I cited, I think that we would have reason to be optimistic about the outcomes of that, but we're definitely looking for opportunities to do it.
Very interesting. Okay, good. Any last questions? Jessica, you've clearly given us a lot of information, and I think you've
hopefully I didn't drown you all.
No, I think this was very good, and clearly I think the lack of questions shows that you covered this topic very well, and we really appreciate the information.
That's great. I really appreciate you hosting me and everybody who joined me today.
Absolutely. So I'd like to say on behalf of Cheryl Osimo, our Executive Director, and our Board of Directors, we would like to thank you for being our speaker today and to thank everyone who took time out of their day to attend. Wonderful information and very valuable. So we wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everyone.